everyone joining us today. Welcome to the season 2 of the Blume book club. Here we utilize the transformative power of storytelling to explore perspectives, cultivate empathy, and inspire positive change. Thank you all so much for joining us today. This is our introduction to our first book. The first one is The Collective by Alison Gaylin. Options for a physical copy as well as a digital copy are in the description box below. So today we won't be covering any chapters or anything. We're just giving our first impressions of the books, and we're going to be answering a couple questions. So first, let's talk about what our topic and question of the season is. So our season theme is collective grief/trauma. Our question for the season is, how does trauma shape us? What consequences of collective trauma are we facing today? How can we support one another in navigating collective grief? So to start us off, we're going to do a quote of the day at the beginning of each episode. So I will go ahead and start us off. And the quote of the day is, "Perseverance is not a long race. It is many short races, one after the other." That is by Walter Elliott. Chose this quote simply just because it resonated with me and what's going on in my life, and just something that I have been kind of keeping in the back of my mind as I go through my daily struggle. Just a great little reminder that, it's the little wins and pushing yourself every little bit that you can. Let's jump in, and I'm going to go ahead and read the synopsis for The Collective, which I'm very excited to read. So the synopsis reads, Camille Gardner is a grieving and angry mother who, 5 years after her daughter's death, is still obsessed with the privileged young man she believes to be responsible. When her rash actions attract the attention of a secret group of women, the Collective, Camille is drawn into a dark web where these mothers share their wildly different stories of loss, as well as their desire for justice in a world where privilege denies accountability and perpetrators emerge unscathed. Fueled by mutual rage, these women orchestrate their own brand of justice through precise, anonymous, complexly plotted, and perfectly executed revenge killings, with individual members completing a specific and integral task in each plan. As Camille struggles to comprehend whether this is a role-playing exercise or a terrifying reality, she must decide if these women are truly avenging angels or monsters. Becoming more deeply enmeshed in the group, Camille learns truth about the Collective and about herself that she may not be able to survive. All right, so for our first question, what are some general expectations, assumptions about the novel? What are some of the thoughts, feelings, and/or internal struggles you anticipate encountering?
I'm bubbling over with excitement about this novel. Just from a perspective of interest level, this feels like my type of book. And I'm super psyched. I think it's a really interesting concept. I think understanding the workings of this underground system, the understanding of how even this kind of group came to be will be really cool.
I think towards the end of that summary, it kind of indicated that she starts feeling like, wait a minute, is this the right thing? So I'm really excited to see that play out. Some internal struggles I anticipate encountering with this book is rooting for our protagonist versus knowing what's probably the best thing to do.
So it's reminding me of those books or novel or books or movies where it's kind of taking you down this place where you're put in their shoes, right? And you want to understand their grieving, and you feel for them, and then you can kind of see how things have gone wrong. You can see how that could easily happen to anyone, and that's a thing that really gets me about movies or books where it's they do something horrible, but you can understand how they got to that point, and you're like, dang, I could see myself getting to that point.
I love those types of books because what it essentially says is you're a monster, you're a monster, you're a monster. And I'm joking. I love novels and films and lots of sorts of media that make you kind of challenge our standards of morality. I think that's really interesting. Our next question, it is, do you think that the way you perceive an individual's overall character and intentions, affects how you perceive their actions? If so, what characteristics might one possess that would make you more or less sympathetic to their quote unquote bad behavior?
I definitely would say someone's intentions will change the way I view what they've done. I will give less grace to what someone's done, especially if it was like harmful, if I feel like they inserted themselves. If they decided, like, for some reason they think that they have the position to like make judgments or like enforce something, I don't know, I'll feel less sympathetic about what their bad behavior. But I feel like someone is doing something that like they were desperate or they needed something and they didn't have any resources or help, then I would feel like more sympathetic about bad behavior.
I find this question a little hard to answer specifically because I just feel that it varies how I view certain situations and the people involved. Because we're all very complex individuals and there are numerous factors that contribute to why someone does what they do. And I just hate to write someone off just solely based on what the crime is or what was done, what the actions are, because I think adulting has showed me like, yeah, there could be a lot going on up here that doesn't always translate in the best way on the outside. So question 3, this book has been compared to Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill and its use of violent themes. There has been a lot of debate in the past few decades about the effects of violent media on the individual. What do you think are the consequences, good and bad, of reading a novel like this?
In terms of like the bad consequences, I think there have been times in history when certain ideas have incited things within people. And so, there's a whole area of research dedicated to how media affects us. And that's for a reason. So I think it makes sense to consider like, how does the stuff that I consume, how does that affect us?
I think some good consequences of reading a novel like this could be being able to see a situation like this play out in like kind of like a bubble. Like, okay, this is what happened, and then they made these choices. Did it fix? Did it help the grieving? Did it bring back your loved one? But some bad consequences could be, I'm certain there's going to be at some point in me reading this where somebody that did something horrible is going to get killed, and I might be a little bit like celebratory about it. So I think definitely depending on the maturity level of readers, they may or may not run with the violent aspect of it, and less with like the grieving portion and kind of understanding that. I don't really think that the book is necessarily gonna create homicidal desires that weren't already pre-existing. Like, I think it's all about the mindset you go into it reading it with.
And I want to be clear that I don't, think that either. I think it's a matter of like, what we have exposure to, I think can change the ideas we have, what we're willing to accept. Even a certain like content, there's been conversations about content exposure to violent media and how that changes your sensitivity to it, which could be related to like our empathy for people, our compassion, like what we're, how far we're willing to go and stuff like that. So like how on a societal level could media like this change things? I'm not sure.
I think I just go back to like, it's individualized how we respond to media. I think the good consequences is ultimately someone who's also grieving can almost have this, they can resonate with certain feelings, those really depressed and deep feelings, and almost play out in a way in their head the fantasies of those things, those actions, and where those can lead. And we can empathize with what they're going through, or even have a greater sense of empathy, because if that level of grief brings you to such heinous crimes, I mean, I feel nothing but sadness and just compassion. For the most part, at least on my end, I just want to be able to sit in what that level of grief could look like and see if I could see that within myself. If I could see, could I possibly get to that level? Or, you know, I think that's just interesting to kind of contemplate my own humanity.
Okay, you all. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a spectrum activity. Every host is going to indicate where the response falls on a scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree to strongly disagree on a list of prompts. So everyone's going to write down their response, and then we're going to do a little count and we'll show our response. Cool?
Yes.
Okay. The prompt is privilege impacts whether we are held accountable for actions. Okay, so we have agree, strongly agree, and strongly agree. Cool. Okay, does anyone want to start off with providing their response?
I just think it's, well, from my perspective, it's quite apparent that that's the case. We've seen this especially in recent years with a lot of the police brutality incidences, and even not to mention that, like, there's been campus rape situations where we see the perpetrator kind of get off, and it's just, I just think this is something we see a lot, and it's obvious and it feels blatant. It feels right in our face, and yeah, I don't see how it's. I can't. I'm having a hard time seeing against that.
So I chose agree, and honestly, in the most literal sense, I could have chosen strongly agree. I chose agree only because when we're talking about privilege, a lot of times that's kind of like a buzzword right now. And a lot of times we're talking specifically about privilege in terms of certain, those big demographic categories, right? So we're talking about race and ethnicity. We're talking socioeconomic status, things like that. Which again, even if that were the case for me personally, I would say strongly agree. But there are ways in which the way I grew up or the way I think, or for certain people, their mental health status, like there are a lot of different ways people can be privileged. And I think even like charm, for example, personality, stuff like that offers certain privileges that other people don't have. And so I guess my reason for putting agree rather than strongly agree would just be to like add a note of, I think there are lots of different forms of privilege, and I think it's so complicated how that affects our view of a situation.
I feel personally affected by hearing about the trauma others experience. I put somewhat agree.
I would strongly agree.
I would agree only because I think it depends on the person and how I view my relationship to them. If it's something so isolated and someone that I have no connection to whatsoever, it can be this distant thing where like I don't feel too super affected by what's happened, which I don't love, but it does allow me to sleep at night. Again, depending on how close that person is to me, it can be quite extreme how deeply impacted I am by others' traumas. I took a psychology class, and we were explaining it. My professor was explaining the difference between empathy and sympathy, and she explained empathy as when someone's in a hole, are you willing to be there to help pull them out and support them? And then sympathy, are you going to be the person to jump in the hole with them and be there? And I realized I'm that person that sometimes jump in the hole with people. And I never really learned how to not do that, just because I felt like it was my way of trying to feel like it was my way of trying to empathize, I think, in a way, because I very naturally did not know how to do that. And so I try to almost foster that sense of empathy.
So I put somewhat agree because kind of like what you were saying, like I feel like personally affected, like I'm just trying to think, I feel like that means like as if it happened to you. And I definitely don't hear what somebody else went through, and it impacts me the same way as if I went through it myself. If they like are reaching out to me saying that they need something that I have to give, like I would definitely not have a problem like helping in any way that I could. I definitely think developing empathy is something that you should do as you spend more time here and living. Like when I was like very small, I distinctly remember saying something that was just crazy. Like I said something to the effect of like, nobody's born poor. Like, why do we have to help poor people? Like, it was just horrible. And I'm just so happy that there's been some character development on my end. Because that is crazy to say that. Like, now that I see how easily any of us could be in any situation.
So that is all we have time for today. That was our intro into this first book, The Collective, that we are also excited to start reading. So again, please stick around for information about the charities our community are supporting this season. And also join us for our very next episode, which will be our first episode of us reading through the book. We'll be covering chapters 1 through 7. So if you'd like to join us, go ahead and start that book. And we have options for you to go ahead and purchase the books in our description box below. Thank you all again. Journey well.
Hey Tribe, before you go, we wanted to chat with you about how you can help your fellow humans navigate collective grief and trauma. This season, each host has chosen a charity to share with you all. The charities we've selected have missions that address collective grief or trauma in some way. Our hope is that you'll find a charity whose mission aligns with your hopes for humanity.
You can check the description box for links to our fundraising pages. We encourage you all to explore the websites for information about each organization's impact and ensure you're making an informed decision when giving. InfoBlue Media has no affiliation with any of these charities or crowdfunding platforms. Thank you all for your consideration.
Journey well.